The year is 1640, and the Ottoman Empire stretches across 3 continents. Its armies feared, its sultans worshipped like gods. For inside the marble walls of Topkapi Palace, the next ruler of this mighty empire sits trembling in a dark, windowless cell. A man everyone has forgotten, except the voices in his head. For 22 years, Prince Ibrahim lived like a ghost. Locked inside the cafes, a gilded prison designed to protect royal bloodlines from each other, he watched his brothers strangled one by one, each death bringing him closer to his own. By the time news reached him that his final brother was dead, Ibrahim had stopped believing in freedom. When the guards opened his door and told him, "You are Sultan now," he thought it was a trick. He refused to leave until they dragged in his brother's corpse to prove it. When he finally stepped into daylight, the world felt unreal, colors too bright, air too heavy. The empire now bowed before a man who had forgotten what it meant to be human. Ibrahim was 35. He had never ruled, never loved, never touched another person freely. And when he was handed absolute power, he didn't see an empire to lead. He saw a cage he could finally unlock. At first, the court whispered that he was strange but harmless. He spent hours staring into mirrors, laughing and weeping at his own reflection. Then came the women. His mother, Kösem Sultan, urged him to produce heirs to secure the dynasty. But what began as royal duty quickly turned into obsession. Ibrahim didn't want just concubines, he wanted perfection. He sent agents across the empire with bizarre orders. Find me the softest skin in Persia. Find me the tallest woman in Egypt. Find me eyes blue as the Aegean and hair black as night. Within months, the harem had swollen to more than 200 women. The palace treasury bled gold to satisfy his fantasies. Silks from China, perfumes from India, jewels from Africa. Each night became a ritual, each encounter stranger than the last. The courtiers called him Ibrahim the Mad, but they hadn't yet seen madness, because the Sultan, who spent half his life in chains, was about to use his new freedom to build a kingdom of forbidden pleasures and drown an empire in desire. They called it the Palace of Heaven, but for the women who lived inside it, it was a cage made of gold. When Sultan Ibrahim took the throne, he didn't rebuild armies or strengthen borders. He rebuilt the harem and turned it into a living theater of desire. Walls were painted with gold leaf. Fountains poured rose water instead of water. Perfumed air filled every corridor. But beneath the beauty, something darker pulsed. Ibrahim didn't just collect women, he orchestrated them. Every day his servants brought in new arrivals. Greek, Persian, Arab, Circassian, each one chosen for some peculiar trait he demanded. One had to sing like a nightingale. Another had to laugh like a child. A third had to cry beautifully. He gave them names like Emerald, Jasmine, Moonlight, and Sugar, as if they were flavors, not people. Each night he invented new games. Sometimes he commanded the women to reenact scenes from old Ottoman legends. Other nights he ordered them to dress as animals or angels, turning his chambers into something between a carnival and a nightmare. The palace servants whispered that the Sultan no longer saw his concubines as women at all, but as living art pieces, props in his endless fantasies. He designed new furniture himself, beds shaped like ships, cushions embroidered with verses of forbidden poetry. He even ordered mirrors to be installed on every wall, so he could watch himself reflected 100 times as he played God over beauty. The empire's treasure vanished into this madness. Gold meant for the army became necklaces. Funds meant for the poor became scented oils. Even the palace architects complained, because every week the Sultan demanded new rooms to be built, each stranger than the last. But behind the silks and perfumes, something was changing inside Ibrahim. Every pleasure left him emptier than before. Every new woman bored him faster. So he kept pushing further, chasing a satisfaction that no longer existed. The Grand Vizier began keeping records, not of laws or taxes, but of what the Sultan ordered for his next night. He knew what the empire didn't. The man who ruled it was slowly losing his mind, and deep inside the harem, jealousy was growing. 200 women fighting for the affection of one unstable man, a man who could make you a queen one day, and have you executed the next. The whispers had begun, and soon one of those whispers would start a chain of events that would stain the Bosphorus red. The harem was no longer a home of pleasure. It had become a battlefield. silk curtains hiding silent wars between jealous queens. Each woman fought not for love, but for survival. Because when the Sultan's eyes turned cold, you disappeared. They said jealousy could kill in Topkapi Palace, and one night it did. It began with a whisper. One of Ibrahim's favorite concubines, known as Scheherazade, was accused of betrayal. Another woman, desperate for power, told the Sultan she had seen Scheherazade lying with a guard. The claim was false, but Ibrahim's mind was already a storm. He trusted no one, not even the mother of his own son. That night the palace went silent. The guards were summoned. Lanterns flickered across the marble courtyard as the Sultan, half-dressed and trembling with rage, stormed into the harem. He didn't speak. He simply pointed at Scheherazade. "Drown them," he ordered. And when the guards hesitated, he screamed louder, "All of them!" By morning, 300 women were dead. Their bodies wrapped in silk and thrown into the Bosphorus, the water glimmering red under the rising sun. Fishermen who saw it said the sea smelled of roses and blood. From that day, the people called him Ibrahim the Mad. But inside the palace, his madness only deepened. He banned mirrors from his chambers, claiming the reflections whispered against him. He ordered golden cages to be built for his favorite concubines, forcing them to sing to him for hours while he fed them sweets with his bare hands. Some said he spoke to the dead. Others swore they saw him crawl on all fours, pretending to be a lion, roaring through the palace halls. The empire outside began to rot. Soldiers went unpaid. Farmers starved. But the Sultan no longer cared about thrones or wars. He was chasing visions no one else could see. His mother, Kösem Sultan, watched her son unravel. She had ruled through 6 emperors, pulled the strings of the Ottoman court like a master. But for the first time she feared her own blood. She knew one truth the empire hadn't yet learned. When a man who was once caged tastes too much freedom, his hunger can destroy the world around him, and soon that hunger would turn on her. By 1647, the once mighty Ottoman Empire was rotting from the inside. The markets were empty. Soldiers rioted for unpaid wages. But inside Topkapi Palace, Sultan Ibrahim lived in a dream woven from silk and delusion. He no longer ruled his empire. He ruled his fantasies. He built a golden pool filled not with water, but with milk and honey, where his concubines bathed while musicians played flutes all night. He wore robes sewn from leopard skins, claiming the spirit of the beast gave him strength. And when he wasn't lost in pleasure, he was lost in fear of ghosts, of poison, of betrayal. His mother, Kösem Sultan, watched everything in silence. She had been the real ruler behind 3 sultans. But now she saw her son slipping further into madness, and with him, the empire she'd built with decades of blood and cunning. Then came the final straw. One morning, Ibrahim summoned his mother and declared that the treasury would be emptied. Not for war, not for famine relief, but to buy every fur coat in the empire. "I will line my palace in fur," he said, smiling. "Even the walls must feel warm when I touch them." That same night he accused his own infant son of plotting against him. Yes, an infant. He ordered the baby's execution. Kösem begged him to stop. He shouted that the boy's cries mocked him. It was in that moment she realized her son was no longer a ruler. He was a weapon aimed at the empire's heart, so she did what no mother should ever have to do. She began to plot his downfall. The whispers started in the barracks, in the tea-houses, among the viziers who had grown tired of humiliation. They said the empire must be saved from its own sultan. Kösem arranged secret meetings, sending coded letters through the palace servants. The plan was dangerous. If Ibrahim found out, she would die before sunrise, but the soldiers were ready. The people were starving, and the Grand Mufti, the empire's highest religious authority, had already signed a decree. The Sultan was unfit to rule. One July morning, as the call to prayer echoed over Istanbul, the palace gates burst open. Armed janissaries stormed the courtyard. Ibrahim, half asleep, stumbled from his chambers, wrapped in a golden robe. He looked up at his mother standing on the balcony, and for the first time, she didn't bow. The man who had drowned 300 women, who had turned an empire into a playground of madness, was about to face his final judgment. Dawn broke over Istanbul like a bruise, purple, grey, and silent. For the first time in years, the palace gates stood unguarded. The mighty Sultan Ibrahim, Lord of 10,000 souls, master of the East and West, was now a prisoner. They dragged him through the same marble halls where he once commanded armies and courtesans. Now the scent of rosewater was replaced with sweat and fear. He looked around, confused, his mind too shattered to understand that the empire he thought he owned had turned against him. "Where are my angels?" he muttered. "Where's my mother?" In a small chamber, they locked him away. The same kind of dark, airless cell where he had once spent his youth as a forgotten prince. The circle had closed. The boy in the cage had become the king who built his own. Outside, the divan, the council of viziers, met in grim silence. The Grand Mufti unrolled a parchment and read aloud the decree of deposition. Ibrahim bin Ahmed is declared unfit to rule. His reign is ended by the will of God and the law of empire. There was no celebration, only relief. For 10 days, Ibrahim remained locked away. Sometimes he laughed. Sometimes he wept. Sometimes he screamed that the women in his dreams were drowning again. His mother, Kösem Sultan, visited him once. She stood in the doorway, veiled in black. He crawled to her feet, whispering, "Mother, tell them I was only trying to feel alive." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. History would never forgive her for what came next. On August 18, 1648, the guards entered his cell. 2 men in silence. One carried a bowstring. The other carried a decree. Ibrahim didn't resist. He simply looked up, smiled faintly and said, "So, it ends where it began." Moments later, the Sultan who once ruled an empire of half the world was gone, strangled not by enemies, but by his own past. They buried him quietly beside his ancestors, in a tomb smaller than a servant's room. Outside, the empire moved on. New sultans rose, wars continued, palaces glittered again. But the people never forgot the one they called Ibrahim the Mad, because his story wasn't just about lust or power. It was about what happens when a man locked away 2 long mistakes, pleasure for freedom. And somewhere beneath the marble floors of Topkapi Palace, they say his spirit still wanders, searching for the one thing he never truly had: peace.